Feelings matter, but facts matter more. That's the opening pretext of this video that I want to focus on. Feelings matter, but facts matter more. And I think this is especially important at this time amidst the never ending culture wars that we see in Western society between left and right, with identity politics, with wokeism. It's so important to underline this point. Feelings matter, but facts matter more. Now, the reason I say feelings matter and not feelings don't matter is because you do have to consider that if there is widespread feeling about something, if there is people who feel that there is injustice, if they have contention to something, their concerns need to be heard. It doesn't mean that the concerns have to be agreed with, but I think in a free society, everyone has their opinion, right? So let's have a scenario where someone feels like they are being singled out or bullied or treated in an unpleasant or discriminatory way. That person needs to be listened to, just as a matter of civility. Listen to what their concerns are. But if they're making allegations, there has to be some basis for that. Otherwise, you end up in a situation where the person they're accusing could end up getting punished over nothing. And for me, one of the most concerning things in recent years has been the tendency for allegations. I think this is particularly true of the Me Too movement to somehow equate to guilt. So if you get a man in public life, he could be an actor, he could be a singer, he could be a politician, a sports personality, and he's accused of sexual assault on a woman or women even. Um, if it's the plural, then there's probably no smoke without fire. So, common sense would dictate there's probably something in it. Nevertheless, an accusation is still just an accusation without actual tangible evidence. I think with sexual crimes in particular, it's always a very difficult thing because it's always his word against hers. I really have a problem with the saying "believe all women" on the grounds that that totally throws away any sense of due process. If you advocate that statement, then every time a man is accused, let's just forget a trial. Let's just throw him in jail. Let's just punish him without any evidence other than her word. I think the correct way to deal with assault allegations or rape allegations or other serious allegations of that sort made against men is to show sympathy to the accuser, to listen to what she has to say, to listen to her experience, and then to weigh up the facts. Now, if there's obvious things that don't add up, for example, she claimed something happened at a certain time and it transpires that the man in question was at a different location at that time, things like that would be an area to look at in terms of credibility. Also, if the woman has a record of lying, for example, or if the man has a record of accusations against him, that might mean that there is something in it. But the principle of due process is extremely important. It goes back to um, probably beyond, but certainly some of it could be based on the philosophy of William Darrow, British lawyer in the 18th century. There was a series made about him actually on ITV, and he's associated with with the concept of innocent until proven guilty. No, I don't know if he personally developed it, but he's certainly associated with it. That's extremely important. Um, but in this era, and I think it's even more volatile with the race issue. It's volatile with the whole men versus women dynamic, but it's especially volatile with the race issue, even more so. I would say that's even more inflammatory than the Me Too thing, on the grounds that it gets even more tribal. I mean, to put it bluntly, white women might agree with white men, that some of the tactics of Black Lives Matter unfairly tarnish all white people. But, so that's going to be an area where there might be some common ground. Um, but I think when it comes to race, especially in America, there is just so much emotions involved that I do think often facts are just thrown out of the window. And there's many examples of this. The case at that university where the black students, female black students, accused white male students of racial abuse. It turned out that they were lying and that they'd actually instigated the whole thing. Now, the university immediately went to show solidarity with them. It immediately went to denounce the young white guys. Then, when the facts were known, when the CCTV showed a very different picture, the university's attitude was, oh, well, let's not rush to judgment. Oh, but it's fine for you to judge the young white guys. There's many other examples. The Covington Boys incident that I've mentioned a few times, in which major news networks rushed to vilify Nick Sandman, the young guy involved in that situation. Um, and then there's cases where, you get people who are exposed as liars, like Jussie Smollett, who claimed to have been the victim of a racist attack, and later the facts showed a very different story. So this is not to say that people alleging serious crimes should be disbelieved. That would be awful. People alleging serious crimes. I mean, I've always been sympathetic to victims of crime, so I would never say don't believe that person. I think police, as first responders, need to show sympathy and they need to listen to what the person is saying. But there has to be due process. The problem with these culture wars is facts are thrown out the window. It's all about my truth. But I'm sorry, there is only one truth. You cannot say, well, that's my truth, therefore, believe me. It's only the truth if there is evidence backing that, or if there's not evidence because it isn't always possible. Um, then it's just a case of having to know the facts or having to accept that we don't know the whole story. I accept that, it isn't always possible to produce direct evidence. Maybe there is no CCTV. So, I certainly wouldn't put an onus on a victim of crime to show the evidence. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that facts matter. And I really think that it's quite troubling how wokeism just puts out this dogma. This is the way it is, and you have to agree or else. It's very, very alarming. An example actually is the recent thing with Meghan and Harry. And, I feel like apologizing for bringing that up again because my goodness, it's been extensively covered. But it is probably a good example because a lot of Americans, or rather a lot of left wing Americans, are immediately jumping to conclusions about this. They're immediately assuming that Archie hasn't got a royal title because he's mixed race, ignoring the fact that Princess Anne's children don't have royal titles either. Sarah Phillips doesn't have a royal title. The title only goes in a direct lineage of the line of succession. Therefore, the Queen, Charles, William, George. Harry is William's brother, therefore his child won't have a royal title because Harry is now further down the line of succession. That's how it works. It's nothing to do with the fact that the child is a mixed race. Um, but let's just ignore those facts and let's just think of it as all these terrible archaic British royals are so racist. Um, it's just alarming, frankly, not just that case, but more generally speaking, that emotions are put ahead of facts. And do not underestimate the ability of some people to be very manipulative with tears, with playing up the victimhood narrative. That's not to say they shouldn't be believed, but it doesn't mean that it is gospel truth. It just doesn't. So, for example, with the Meghan Markle thing, she's alleging mental health problems, she's alleging depression and racism. Let's take those things seriously, but let's also be open minded enough to not assume that she has a monopoly on truth, because she doesn't. Um, It's actually potentially quite dangerous because this sort of thing where you focus in on emotions and you focus in on a perception of something can lead to mob mentality. There have been many cases, especially in the States, where someone has been accused of racism and then suddenly they're cancelled, they're vilified, they are. I frankly find it rather scary because it can happen to anyone. You can be completely, you could even be, a very lefty sort of person, very much into charity and sending out the right message and all that. Tiniest misunderstanding when it comes to woke dogma can leave you a target. I would say that wokeism and woke mob mentality is sort of the Western equivalent of the Chinese Red Guards in the 60s. Now, it's not as bad as that because we're not seeing mass murders yet. However, you can imagine that the mental health impact on someone who's being vilified all over social media, all over the news, by pundits who don't bother considering the facts and they just pontificate and they just vilify someone. Um, you can imagine that would have a serious effect on mental health and potentially lead to suicides. In fact, there have been a few suicides around the Me Too situation of men who've been accused of things. That doesn't mean that they're innocent. It just means that, that's the sort of consequence that can happen. Um, so I'm not saying that public figures can't be judged. I do think if you're in the public eye, you're responsible for your own words. However, media pundits, I think it's frankly disgusting how they distort things sometimes. Um, it's more than that. It's actually dangerous. It's reckless. It's inflammatory. CNN has a lot to answer for, in my opinion, when it comes to their coverage of race issues. And Fox News is, you get the equivalent on the right, not so much with race issues, but with other things. So I do think the media has a very big role to play in this when they take things out of context, when they only give part of a quotation. But by the same token, I think public figures have responsibility in what they say. So, what's the answer? The answer is to keep stressing the point that facts matter more than opinions, or facts matter more than feelings. Feelings do matter. I wouldn't dismiss them. If someone is clearly unhappy, it needs to be looked at. Why are they unhappy? What is the source of this? What can we do to make them more comfortable? However, I draw the line at starting to dictate to others because someone is feeling sensitive about something. That's where I draw the line. That's when it starts getting into the realm of violating other people's freedom, frankly. Freedom of speech, freedom of ideas. I mean, an example would be the way that women are now being told to think in a certain way because of trans pronouns, um, because they insist that biology matters. They're now being told that if they use terms like mother or female biology, this sort of thing, and they're hate mongering. So we also need to be very careful as to how sensitivity can be weaponized. This can be seen in other examples, even beyond Western culture wars. I mean, the way the Chinese regime uses sensitivities to try and bully diplomats into silence or try to get their own way is very, very manipulative. A typical attitude from the CCP would be if they've been criticised on human rights or they've been criticised on their attitudes, they would say you've hurt the feelings of the Chinese people. It's very manipulative and it needs to be called out. In the end of the day, nothing is more pure than the plain truth. Nothing is more innocent and pure than the absolute truth as a concept, as an idea, as a reality. Okay, so talking about my truth, I don't buy that because I think it's a very manipulative way of saying, well, I'm going to make allegations, but I don't really have to back them up. I'm going to smear someone as a racist, but I don't really have to provide evidence for it. I don't think that's good enough. I think if you're going to make a serious accusation, you need to be prepared to back it up.